Okay, so for my project, I decided to talk about Down syndrome. So in your typical general biology class in high school, since I'm studying science education, we would go over at some point metaphase, meiosis 1, meiosis 2. So this is the way I personally would integrate how to raise awareness in the classroom for Down syndrome. So if we look over here, we'll see this is a very rough diagram of what happens, and this is called meiosis 2 disjunction. So what pretty much happens is when we start off in meiosis, after interphase, we see that we end up with chromosomes, and just to make long story short, by the end of meiosis 2, we'll see that they'll have a pair of a chromosome of the mom and the pair of chromosome of the dad, and you end up with 2 haploid cells here. So again, you end up with 2 cells. So what typically happens is if we look over here in this diagram, in metaphase, we know that the sister chromatids are pulled apart, and what's supposed to happen ideally is you end up with an even number for the mom and an even number for the dad in 2 cells. Well, what often happens in this non-disjunction is that you end up, the metaphase doesn't end up being, let's just say it wasn't as effective, some little mistake happened during metaphase. So you might end up with one of the dad here, another one of the dad here, and you end up with one of the mom here, right here. And on the other one, you may only end up with, oh, wrong color. The one here, you may only end up with one of the mother here, green. So people who have, this would result in Down syndrome. So this one, you would consider this one to be N+1, this one N-1. So typically when you see Down syndrome, you'll see someone with 47 chromosomes, and then you'll have, and this one's a little more rare here, you'll have the 45. And this happens because of the mistake that happens during metaphase. So what I would switch to when I would be talking about Down syndrome, I would talk about this condition being called write it up here, trisomy 21. And the reason for why it's called trisomy 21 is because a person with Down syndrome would end up with a third chromosome in the chromosome 21. Typically, you're supposed to only have 2, but you have 3 pairs instead. So from there, I would talk about the different characteristics. So people with Down syndrome, yeah, they have intellectual disabilities. Oftentimes that can result in like heart conditions, even thyroid problems. But overall, they're normal, just like us. They can still go out, they can still play, they can be in sports, they can be in drama, and I would be talking about the acceptance of that. They may not be able to do all the different types of, like for here, they may not be able to draw all the different kinds of stages that happen in meiosis 1, meiosis 2, but they could build the diagrams. They could very much, some of them are really great drawers. I could put them up there to draw maybe the beginning stage of the cell. And then they could see that people with Down syndrome are just like us. And in fact, they themselves have their strengths, their weaknesses. And if the child was comfortable with it, I could have the child talk about their strengths and weaknesses and how this makes us just a more diverse class, just like anybody else. So that's the way I would integrate this into my classroom to raise awareness for Down syndrome.